Welcome to the Advantage Podcast, a monthly unscripted conversation with host David Ashcraft and top leaders impacting our world. Created by pastors for pastors to strengthen our leadership and expand our knowledge and influence.
Well, hey guys, welcome to the Advantage Podcast, and it's my privilege today to have two guests with us, one Pearl Parks and then Javy Diaz. And Pearl, why don't you tell who you are? You lead our outreach ministries, and I don't even know titles anymore, but your title, tell us your title and tell us who you are and what you do at LCBC.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I get to serve with our central team here at LCBC. So I work with resourcing all of our locations, specifically around global and local impact, which is an absolute blast and definitely something that's really close to my heart. I've been working with Impact it'll be 14 years this summer. My husband, Matt, is also on staff. He's a teaching pastor and a campus pastor at one of our locations, and 3 kids. We've got a daughter graduating college this summer, and then I know a rising freshman in high school and a middle schooler. So full house and just having fun, keeping busy.
So I like the term global impact, and I think that might have been referred to 30 or 40 years ago as missions, and then even just global outreach, but now global impact. And you and Matt have been around LCBC since early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, 2005.
2005, so a long time, so 21 years. So yeah, fun to have you guys a part of LCBC. Javy Diaz works with World Vision and has worked closely with LCBC over the last number of years. And so Javy, introduce yourself real quick if you would as well.
Yeah, sure, David. It's so good to be with you guys this morning. I'm Javy Diaz. I'm a church engagement director. That's the role that I inhabit at World Vision. I've been on the team for the last 9 years, coming up on 10 years in November, and just have had just the privilege of walking alongside LCBC and what they're doing globally. And so I'm married to an amazing woman, Sarah Diaz. We're coming up on 20 years in October. And together we have 3 children, Ezra Stone, who's 14 going on 15, Shiloh Wren, who's 12 going on 13, or sometimes I think 30. And then Gideon Beck, who's my 10-year-old, who will turn 11 in October as well. And so we're based here in Wilmington, Delaware, just over the border. And it's super exciting to be able to talk a little bit about what we do and what we do together. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Cool. Fun to have you with us. We won't hold it against you that you're across the border in Delaware. I think you still might have some things that could be helpful for Pennsylvania pastors as well. And we have a great relationship at LCBC with World Vision, and we'll maybe describe that a little bit later. But really wanted to talk to you about, as Pearl talked about, global impact, just give you a little sense of where we've come from at LCBC, how we view global ministries, as I mentioned, missions or global outreach, now global impact, and our thoughts and philosophy with that, and maybe how it might help you and your churches as well. So, Pearl, let me start with you, and let's just talk a little bit about history. You said you've been doing this for 9 years now. And so do you even remember back, and I know you and I had lots of conversations 9 years ago about what our whole international efforts will look like, but do you remember back to early days of LCBC and how we even got to where we are today?
Yeah. So when I came on staff initially at LCBC in 2005, really you had just started partnering with World Vision, I think maybe 2 years before that, if I remember correctly, and engaging specifically in sponsoring children in Kenya. And at the time, the AIDS pandemic was a huge global issue, and something that churches were maybe not engaging with as much as maybe we should have, of being willing to step into some vulnerable spaces and just make the love of Jesus easy to see there. And just so grateful for your leadership and your vision you had to take us into that space. I think, what we saw coming out of that was not only an opportunity to engage in a space that was overlooked and under-resourced, but also an opportunity to really engage our people at a grassroots level. I think there was a lot of people at that point that maybe wouldn't think of themselves as being interested in quote unquote missions. But when you talk about the opportunity to come alongside a child somewhere in the world and sponsor them, develop a relationship with them, and through the donations that you're making to a partner organization like World Vision, not only helping that child, but helping elevate their family and their community out of, deep poverty, both spiritual and physical. And I think that people just could wrap their brains around, okay, I can sponsor a child. And through that, it became this doorway for people to engage in global missions who maybe never would have done that before. And I think that that's the fruit that was really exciting of, we went from those couple people on the missions committee who were invested and cared about what God was doing in the world, but maybe not a lot of awareness outside of that to, like half of our people now being engaged in sponsoring children around the world.
Yeah, so I think that's real cool. So let's even go back and just talk about, and I know Pearl and Javi, you guys both have church backgrounds. So when I was growing up, missions was in the way the church in Dallas that I was a part of, we would sponsor, I think we didn't sponsor, we had about 50 missionaries that we counted as our missionaries around the world. We had a hallway, a real long hallway, and we had a picture that was probably very dated of each of those couples or families from the last time they were in the United States before they went out to the mission field. We probably sponsored them for about $150 a month. So it wasn't a heavy responsibility or an injection into their finances. And we didn't know a whole lot about them. I mean, they would come through every 4 or 5 years and you'd kind of think, who are they and what are they doing and why are we even supporting them? I know for me, early staff member at our church in Dallas, one of my responsibilities was the missions conference. And so we would every year bring in 2 or 3 missionaries, 4 or 5 missionaries from around the world. I remember it as a kid. I loved this. We would always have, the first Sunday that the missions conference started, we would carry in flags, or kids would carry in flags from all the different countries, and would put them all around the auditorium. And it was just a very pomp and circumstance thing. But we really, outside of that, there wasn't a whole lot of interaction. And I don't know what y'all's experiences were growing up as kids. That's my memory of missions from a kid standpoint.
Yeah. I grew up in a Pentecostal tradition, David. Don't hold that against me either. And so like in our tradition, most of the flags were from Latin America and the Caribbean. There were very few flags from other nations from around the world that I could probably recognize or point out. Our global efforts were kind of restricted to pastors from denominations being sent to other countries to lift up new congregations in other contexts, some of which were different and new for the denomination as a whole. So a lot of our global missional efforts were tied directly to a denominational effort that was being sent, right? And so whether they were missionaries or pastors in new churches, and then a tithe of a tithe was taken right out of the church that was given to the denomination that supported the work of missionaries. And so it was pretty similar to the way that you came up in Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting is we felt like we were a missions-focused church, and we prided ourselves on that. And yet the reality, Pearl, you mentioned now what happens is so many people are engaged in what we're doing globally. But I would say back in Dallas, most of us weren't. And like I said, every time one of those missionary families would come home off the field, then we would think, who are these people and why are we even supporting them? And we don't know them. And so it's just always this tension. And so when I came to LCBC, we had already, the church was about 3.5 years old. There were already about 3 or 4 families that we supported as a church, just out of a sense of we ought to be doing something missionally. And we quickly kind of weaned ourselves from those 4 or 5 missionaries and said, maybe we need a different approach. And honestly, for the first 10 years at LCBC, we were so focused on just trying to get LCBC going, figure out what direction we're in, that we weren't doing a whole lot. And it was back probably, Pearl, I think around 2001 or 2 when Rich Stearns, he was leading World Vision, and he came through town and talked about the AIDS epidemic. And And we decided to partner with World Vision at that point in a specific community in Kenya. And I've told this story before, but as we were preparing for our weekend of sponsorships, and that was the old way where you'd go out and there'd be pictures of kids in packets, and you could pick what kid you wanted to sponsor. I remember Ruth and I, Saturday before Sunday, we're walking around and looking at all those packets, and I noticed on all the packets Ken, the name Ken, K-E-N. And after about 7 or 8 packets that said Ken, I said to Ruth, I knew this was a scam. All these kids, there's no way they're all named Ken. And so I'm starting to seethe and be upset. And then we looked a little closer, and Ruth goes, actually, Ken is short for Kenya, David, and all these kids are Kenya, and that's what it is. It's not a scam. So anyway, but it was a fun thing where we said, what if we could just sponsor one classroom of kids? But that first weekend, I think we sponsored close to 780 kids. And so it went very quickly from a classroom to a school. And I think now, even the last number I saw, Pearl, it's over 8,000 kids that are sponsored at LCBC. And so fun to see that work. But part of it was partnerships. And I know, Pearl, that's become a big thing for us of saying we're not the experts here of what's going on internationally. So let's find partners that we can work with that really are experts in their area.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That whole framework of, we talk about it as partnering, not pioneering, that, we really want to stay ruthlessly focused on what we're called to as a church, which is introducing people to Jesus and together fully following him. And we absolutely believe that caring for others outside of our church is a core part of that. But we don't want to get distracted trying to become experts in things like, food security or global development or, preventing domestic violence, all these different issues that our communities face here and around the world. But there are fantastic organizations like World Vision that are not only deeply passionate, but also deeply knowledgeable about how to address and provide effective solutions to these problems in the name of Jesus. And so our goal is to really link arms with them, providing people and resources to help them go further faster and really partner that way that it's a win-win on both sides.
Well, and you mentioned expertise. So reasons to partner. Let's maybe talk a little bit about that. And Javy, I'll ask you to take off your World Vision hat and just talk as somebody that understands global impact. But one of them is expertise. And so we definitely acknowledge we don't know what's going on internationally. We don't know what communities need. And so that's one. I know financially, Pearl was one early on. And just the cost of sending a couple from the United States now just feels, I don't know if it's prohibitive or not, but it minimizes the things you can do and the failure rate. There's just so many reasons why we just said, man, what are we doing this for? Why don't we work with people that are from the area that they're serving? They know that area well. And so I would say finances was a good reason for us. Expertise was another good reason. Javy, can you think of other reasons why there's benefits to working with people that already have boots on the ground in the communities around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reality is that each of us, if I were to ask, you as a pastor in central Pennsylvania, what are the needs of that community, you'd probably have a hit list of things that need to be addressed in order for that community to live into the fullness that God desires for them, right? And so you would go to the local leaders of that community. You go to your police department, you go to your fire department, you go to elected officials, you go to your school boards, right? And you would talk to people that have in-depth knowledge about the needs and the opportunities that can be met through a partnership with your church. And so I think whether it's World Vision or any other global NGO, there's power in having local individuals that are in positions of authority and influence that can speak to the issues that community is facing. And so, where we come alongside as a partner is to have that boots on the ground experience, to be able to say, these are the things that we've seen both from a grassroots level, but also from the upper echelons of a government, that say these are the things that are wrong and that you can help us impact, not in a way that we remove dignity or authority from that community, but in ways that really is a coming alongside of communities that say, hey, if we did these 3 to 5 things, we think we'd see radical change, right? And so I think that's true for, the 20 plus so expressions of LCBC too, right? Like there there are certain things about every campus that are in alignment with kind of the overarching strategy and vision of LCBC as a global church, as a local church. But then there are very like specific like particulars of that campus or that location that are just nuance for those people, for that group of sheep.
Yeah. So Pearl, let's lean into that a little bit because you also mentioned earlier. So it's finances, it's expertise, reasons to partner with other organizations. One, we've just seen engagement on our people's part. And so it's gone from, at least my experience, going to a missions conference once a year where you enjoy the pomp and circumstance of the flags, to now people feeling very engaged in a community somewhere around the world. And it's fascinating to me how seriously people take it. And some people take it at different levels than others, but they take it very seriously. And so that level of engagement has been huge. And what kind of things do you see, Pearl, from an engagement standpoint with our people as we partner around the world?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's definitely a spectrum. There's some people that, just want that to be a financial gift that's a part of their routine, a way of, being generous and trusting God that way. All the way to there's people that have, actually seen and visited with their sponsored children in person, been a part of their lives in a greater way. And there's everything in between, but there really is that opportunity to engage on a personal level, if nothing else, through the letters that are written back and forth, the updates that, a sponsor receives a few times a year. There just becomes this ongoing connection and window outside of someone's local bubble that pushes them to think about God and his work in the world on a greater scale.
Yeah, I think that's cool. And so I will readily admit I'm at the bottom level of that engagement side where Ruth and I sponsor a number of kids around the world through several different organizations, and that's all I want to do. Ruth will write letters. We've had opportunity through mission trips to meet our kids. And what's fascinating with that, there's a language barrier oftentimes. And so there's only so long I could stand and smile at somebody. And then it's like, okay, what do we do? What do we do next? And Ruth loves to have that engagement. So it is a spectrum. And I would just say to pastors, you don't have to be personally passionate about trying to change the world other than just realizing it's part of our responsibility. Yeah. And even at LCBC, as we were focused very much in Lancaster and saying, how do we change first Manheim, Lancaster County? And then we really realized, okay, but we do have a responsibility to go out beyond our community and around the world. So what's the best way to do that? And so for me, even though I may not be passionate about connecting with all of our sponsored kids or people around the world, I still am passionate about saying, how do we impact communities around the world? And so that's been a big deal for me. And so let's kind of shift for a second. What are some mistakes that we make? So we partner with, and early on, we partnered with a number of organizations. But as we partnered, I would say, Pearl, so I'll talk about myself, and you can add to, because you've traveled extensively now over the last 9 years. But I think there's a mistake that as Americans we make, where my first trip to Kenya was, oh, okay, here's 10 of us going over to Kenya to save our little community in Kenya because the Americans are coming and we know scripture and we know the way to raise a community and make it profitable. And so I went with a mindset of, I probably didn't think this, but probably it's deep in there. Aren't they lucky that we're coming to kind of change their community? And after being there for a while and after several trips, realized, oh man, they're doing a lot of things right. And their circumstances are very different than ours. And yet I can learn from them. And it's not me coming in as a savior, but it truly is a partnership. And so what are some of the mistakes that we make that way? And Javi, feel free to jump in too. But Pearl, what are mistakes you've seen people make, mindsets or churches make going into those kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that's one that you already mentioned, just thinking that, we have the solutions and we are taking God to somewhere else. The reality is God is already there. God's spirit is already actively at work. We're just partnering with what he's doing and partnering with, our brothers and sisters to bring that to bear in the world. So, I think that's a huge one, is just recognizing that humility of, we don't necessarily have the answers, and we don't have exclusive access to God's work in the world. He's
Yeah.
far beyond what we're doing. We just get to join him. So I think that's one um, that I always come back to with people, just reminding them like how important that is to recognize yourself in the right place. I think that one of the other things that's easy to fall into is kind of just putting band-aids on problems rather than addressing underlying root causes and systems. So, it's always the easiest and feels the best to quickly remedy a surfacing problem that you see. Like maybe someone is starving, so you want to give them food, and that feels really good in the moment. It feels very tangible and immediate. But the reality is there is a whole story behind why that person doesn't have food in the first place. And so that's part of what we love about working with partners like World Vision is that they are not only addressing those immediate needs, but also working on that larger scale to get at the roots of spiritual and physical poverty so that they can really elevate the community long term. Javi, I don't know if there's anything you would add to that or.
I mean, I think you said it perfectly well. I think the speed at which we try to do things often is our biggest enemy. The reality of cyclical poverty is that it's been there not just for a generation, but multiple generations, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 generations. And so dismantling that cyclical nature of poverty doesn't happen overnight. It's like I'm a little heavier today than I want to be. And thinking that I'm going to lose the 30 pounds that I want to lose when it took me a couple of years to get here is not realistic, right? It takes time to kind of dismantle the patterns that brought us to the day we are in today. And so I think that's certainly true. And then I think the other side of that is that sometimes the world's problems seem so big, right? They seem so insurmountable that we don't know how to take our first step. Sometimes the pace of trying to resolve something really fast is really easy for us to do. But I think the other side of it is also true. Sometimes the world's problem seems so big that we don't know how to take our first step in entering the brokenness of the world. So that's a little bit of what I see too.
Yeah. And I realized, listening to you talk, a lot of that's kind of at a very philosophical level. I think one of the mistakes too that I see us making on a really pragmatic level is maybe to your point, Javi, you're kind of overwhelmed by the need. And so you think like, okay, we'll do a little bit of everything. And I think as a church, that can be one of the greatest dangers is doing a lot, but not really accomplishing very much because you're spread so thin and the vision is muddy. And so people are less likely to take action because the step that you're calling them to is so diluted that it's not clear. And so just not having a sense of focus on here's what we are called to, here's what we're calling you as the church to step up and engage in, and just being willing to say no so that you can give a good yes to the right thing.
Yeah. So that's a big deal, Pearl, in thinking that way. And so several things that we've had to say no to over the years. One would be we have chosen, and I'm not trying not to disparage the traditional missions model of churches. I think there probably is a place for some churches to still be engaged in that. And that may be your pattern and what you're using in your church. For us, we chose to go away from that, again, because of lack of expertise in different areas, because of financial reasons. There is a sense sometimes, Pearl, of, man, let's do quick fixes. And so you mentioned giving food out to somebody that's hungry. And there are times when food needs to be given to those that are hungry and medical care and things like that. But the kind of things that we have watched even ourselves be tempted to do is, they need water in Africa, so let's send a truck over and we'll just go around and we'll drill wells everywhere, and somehow we're solving people's waters issue. What we've realized working through our partners is, unless you work with the community, unless there is buy-in and you work through the cyclical things that have happened or the systemic things that have happened that led to that shortage of water, then those wells are going to sit and they're going to be empty. Or we think, let's send clothes over. And so whenever people travel, they'll say, I always always leave all my clothes behind and I bring back an empty suitcase. And that always sounds so good and so wonderful. And yet what we have also learned over the years is if we send all kinds of clothes over to Africa or whatever part of the world you're working in and give to the people in need, then we've taken away jobs or opportunities to earn money from those that may be making clothes in those areas. So there's always a cause and effect. And it was even fascinating for me to learn as we drilled wells with World Vision. We help people not have to walk for hours at a time to get water, but we also disrupted their social structure because that's part of the way the women in the community talked, and that was how they worked together. And so you've got to replace that. And so if you just go over and throw solutions, quick solutions at people, then it can be more problematic than actually helpful. I will also say, so maybe let's shift a little bit here. And, as we began working with partners, Pearl, around the world, we started out working with World Vision. I would say a couple things where there is power in working with a partner. One, early on, so this would have been 2000, probably about 5, I think, when we started working with World Vision. And sponsorships was their primary way of doing things. And initially it was, we'll just sponsor kids scattered around the world. And what we found is there's power in having one community. So then we as a church are now, as our locations around Pennsylvania, we're able to say, you sponsor one specific community. So you can watch and see that community change. And Pearl, talk a little bit about the power of just everybody being able to zero in on one community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to what I was saying earlier about a sense of focus. There's something about focus that is very galvanizing for people. When there's not a sense of focus, when it's like a general need, a general response, people just don't feel compelled to respond. But when there is this very specific need and this very specific call to action, that galvanizes people. For whatever reason, there's something about human nature that just wants to step up and respond to that. And so that sense of focus, not just in saying we are choosing to do sponsorship, but we're also focusing that sponsorship into a specific region somewhere in the world. There's just power and momentum in that. For engaging our people. On the other side, just being able to leverage critical mass in an intentional way in a region somewhere, it's obviously just provides an influx of resources to help them go further faster as well. And so, we see the benefit, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, Pearl, that's huge because I remember discussions with World Vision back in 2005 and had World Vision ask us to give, at that point in our life cycle as a church, if it said, would you give $10,000 a year or $25,000 a year to help change a community? We didn't have that kind of money in our budget to do that. But by opening up sponsorships, then families were able to, and I don't even remember what the number is now, but back then I think it was $32 a month. Then families were able to do that. And the power of that collective group doing that is substantial. And so I don't even know what the dollars for 8,000 sponsors that we have now at LCBC, but I think it translates into millions of dollars that we're sending around the world. And if you'd ask us to take that out of our budget directly, we probably would have said, there's no way we can do that. But this way it doesn't affect our budget at all. So there is power in that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
I think Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback on that. You mentioned that little phrase, it doesn't affect our budget at all. And I just wanted to call out one thing there. And Javy, you can speak a lot more to this, but something we've experienced as a church is that generosity begets generosity. And so I think sometimes as a church, we fear asking our people to give money to whether it's something external or internal, making that ask, we kind of think, it's a limited pie. So if we send that slice somewhere, then that slice we have in the pie. But the reality is in God's kingdom, it's kind of the opposite. The more you give, the more it just multiplies. And Javy, I know you've seen that with churches you've worked with. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of numbers around that, but just two quick things. I would say that sponsorship and through Chosen and just engagement does beget more generosity within the church. But I'll also say that LCBC integrates generous movements, not just on a weekend, but throughout their discipleship journey, right? There's talks about how is it that we fully follow Jesus together, and generosity is a part of that. So I think there's a culture of that chosen and sponsorship is a part of on a given weekend. But there's a larger culture of generosity that's already occurring at LCBC on the whole. It's a larger conversation than just child sponsorship. Number two, I would say for churches that what we've seen, churches that are participating with World Vision across sponsorship programs and through Chosen, is we've actually seen that 95% of participants say that one, sponsorship hasn't limited their giving to their local church. In fact, 27, almost 30% of those say that their giving to their local church has actually increased after participating in Chosen. So you're right. Generosity does beget generosity. And once we see a need, like Jason was talking about a couple weekends ago, and once we see a need, we want to meet a need. And so we're going to see a need internationally. We're going to meet a need internationally. We're going to see a need locally. We're going to meet a need locally. So it's pretty cool.
So what's fun thinking about that, Pearl, I made the statement it didn't really affect our budget, and it probably did, but it affected it in a positive way where, it didn't take away from it. It actually added to that, which is kind of a cool thing. So fun to see. So again, as we're talking about global impact, I'm not asking you, our Advantage pastors, to change everything about the way you're doing. I'm asking you to think about it, though, and think, is what you're doing effective? Maybe you keep doing what you're doing. Pearl, one of our challenges when we went to partnerships is there still were people in the church that would say, we've been called by God. And so you'd have individuals or couples that would come to you, or it would be the friend of a friend that has been called to work in some faraway country. They're trying to raise their support. And so they would come to LCBC. Typically, I would get a call and then I'd say, you need to talk to Pearl, and I'd let Pearl talk to him. But we had to say no to a lot of people. And so maybe address that a little bit. And what was that like? And do you feel like that still happens today, or is that waned as we've kind of gotten further into this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We still get, those calls periodically. And the reality is, God is at work in a lot of different ways. And God absolutely does call some people into vocational missions to go somewhere in the world and be involved in ministry that way. And we don't want to dampen that call in any way. And so usually that conversation for me is, I want to affirm that. I want to send them out and cheer them on. But I encourage them to say, hey, we've chosen to focus this way. We feel called to this with sponsorship globally. That doesn't take away from your calling. And we would encourage you and even empower you within your relational networks to raise that support team that you need. Because we also realize the reality is we could write a check from the budget, and that's not going to be a personal connection. That's not going to be the support on other levels that you need when you're going into the mission field. You really need a team around you that's lifting you up, that knows you, that's praying with you. And that's going to better come from your relational community within LCBC. And so we say, hey, even though we're not going to commit to giving you a check on a monthly basis or a yearly basis, build those networks from your relationships and have those people that are going to come around you probably far better than we could at an organizational level.
Pearl, that's a wonderful way to say that. And it's so much better than what I would have probably said and probably said in the early days. But I mean, bottom line, it's saying that's wonderful that God's called you to country XYZ. God has called us to kind of go about it this way. And so we want to affirm you and encourage you, but it probably doesn't match up with our calling and kind of working through that. And so that's one of the challenges you face as you go through this. Yeah. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't do a blended thing if you want. Mm-hmm. We have chosen to pretty much sever all those old relationships, I think. Do we have any that we still hung on to, Pearl, or have we pretty much gone straight partnerships?
Yeah, we definitely don't add new ones anymore. There are a few legacy partners that we wanted to honor by just continuing to be faithful in their service until they are retiring out of that. But it's definitely
which I think
not
is
a new
great.
thing adding.
Yeah, I think that's great. One of the things I say all the time, no absolutes. And so you can kind of have, this is the way we typically operate, but no absolutes. And so it's okay too. And I like the term legacy partners that we're going to continue on with. I will say too, choosing who you partner with is a real big deal. And so we have done that over the years at LCBC. Early on, we first started our first community in Kenya with World Vision. And then we decided, oh, we've got to have parity here. And so let's work with a variety of different organizations. And so they're probably at one time, Pearl, were what, 5 or 6 maybe different organizations that we were working with. And then over the years, as we've done that, we've really come back. And I don't think we're exclusively World Vision now, but I think we were primarily working with World Vision. And so, Pearl, what are some of the reasons why we kind of transitioned or migrated back to World Vision? So this will be a little bit and feel like a commercial for a World Vision, but we really, really believe in the work of World Vision. We love their partnership. And so tell us some reasons why, Pearl, that we kind of navigated back to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things. One is that we just realized, same as deciding what your focus is on what you're calling people to, we realized our focus was just getting too broad with adding more and more partners, even if it was just through sponsorship. And so realizing kind of for sustainability's sake that we needed to get a little more focused. And so at that point, we were able to say, okay, we've experienced what it's like to work with a few different partners and just where do we feel the most alignment? And World Vision just really clearly was one of those partners that we share so much vision with about how they view the communities where they're working, how they try to come alongside them, how they want to engage our people in a discipleship journey. So it really was just alignment in a lot of different ways. And we realize not everybody's called to the same thing, but of course, I'm a little biased. I think World Vision is doing incredible work around the world and really, truly is not only is the largest non-government organization that's working around the world, but also doing it incredibly well, very thoughtfully. Yeah. They truly are the experts in what they do and also deeply passionate about the call of God. And so we're really grateful to partner with them.
Yeah, I would say we love working with World Vision. There is no perfect partner. We're not the perfect church. They're not the perfect organization. But some of the things that I know I loved were just the holistic approach. So it's definitely sharing Jesus with people. And Ruth and I have had an opportunity now to travel 7 or 8 times maybe with World Vision. What we say is we've never met a World Vision staff member we don't like. And they just kind of ooze Jesus. And so it's not that they're standing on street corners preaching Jesus, but as they work and help in the community, they just ooze Jesus, and Jesus is present and being talked about throughout the day. I love the focus on water, clean water. I love the focus on education, medical help, even microfinancing, and just helping people get on their feet financially. And so they've got a system. The other thing, Pearl, that really has probably one of the things that sells me also on World Vision is they've got a plan to get in and out of communities. And one of my thoughts was, man, I don't want for the next 100 years, or in my case, 32 years, to be just sponsoring or paying for somebody to just kind of keep doing the same thing over and over. But I love the idea of just that self-sustaining, helping communities become self-sustaining where they can grow and take care of themselves and then move on. So we've had the privilege with World Vision now, moving on to some 3 or 4 communities from one of our campuses, our original location. And that's been fun to see. So love what World Vision is doing. Yeah. Just 1 minute, maybe we're coming up to the end here, but what you love about World Vision. I'm not going to ask you to sell World Vision, but what is it that because you have opportunities to work other places. And so why do you love World Vision? What is it that sells you on World Vision?
Well, every day, David, I thank you for all of those gracious words. We absolutely love working with LCBC. There's not another LCBC out there. And so we're just grateful for the way you all show up and to steal a phrase, make the love of Jesus easy to see. And so, we get to do some really special things together. And I think regardless of whether you're a church of 24,000 or you're a church of 500 to 1,500, every church is called into God's global world, God's global mission to see it and to do something about it. And so one of the things that I love about World Vision is that it really brings, James talks about our faith actually being a living faith, that love actually does something, to borrow from Bob Goff, right? Love does. And so I love that I get to come alongside pastors in their churches and bear witness to the love of Jesus, both to them as individuals, but also to entire congregations that oftentimes don't have a whole lot of opportunities to do something together, right? As an entire community. So bearing witness to the love of Jesus. Number two, I love it when churches flourish. My dad was a pastor for 24 years, and our church, saw somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 people, on the weekend at our tipping point. But the reality is that every single one of us came into a knowledge of Jesus because someone invited us and showed us how to follow him. And so we want to be able to see churches flourish, and we think that partnership with World Vision and organizations like us really do help churches flourish. And then at the end of the day, brother, like what gets me most excited about showing up to work is that I feel like I'm having an impact in the world where we get to end extreme poverty, not just alone, but we get to do it. We get to do it together. And so, bearing witness to the love of Jesus, helping churches flourish, and seeing children rise and stay out of poverty for the long haul. That's a pretty good day's work.
Yeah, very cool. So I would just say, bottom line, we deeply believe in saying, how can we impact the world? And so very much involved that way. If in the conversation today, as you've heard us talk about what we're doing at LCBC, along with our friends at World Vision, if you'd say, man, I'd love to hear more, or I'd love to just understand more what we're trying to do, then I'd love to invite you to one of our upcoming Advantage workshops. And so we do one-day workshops at the Advantage offices. And what we plan to do on this one is go deeper in the conversation we've had today, talk about strategy, but talk about practically, spiritually, how does all this play out so that you can lead your church into just a real meaningful global impact. And so don't stop here, but it's actually Tuesday, August the 18th, and we'll be sending out information. If we haven't yet, we'll send it out after this to the Advantage workshop on global outreach or global impact, and then you can register through the Advantage website. Love to have you join us, though. And Pearl, you and Javy are going to be, or at least Pearl, I know you are, and I hate to put you on the spot, Javy, but I imagine you're going to be involved in that as well. And so you can take this conversation further with them and just have opportunity to even walk away with a strategy or a way that you may want to implement some of these things, either brand new to your church or how to expand on what you're doing in your church and really make an impact internationally. So, Javy, Pearl, thank you for your input. Thanks for what you guys are doing around the world, and appreciate you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us, David.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Advantage Podcast with David Ashcraft, and for participating in our goal to strengthen and encourage pastors and their churches so more people are introduced to Jesus across Pennsylvania. If you found this helpful, feel free to pass it along. To find out more about the work of The Advantage, visit our website at theadvantage.org.